The government shutdown has now been resolved. As of this video on Wednesday, November 12th, the House and Senate have both approved the government funding bill, and it will now be sent to President Trump for his signature. In the end, the shutdown has been resolved. Now, with that said, people want to know what is actually included in this funding bill. Did Republicans secure what they were pushing for? Did Democrats get anything they demanded? We are going to go through this step by step. Here is what happened. The Senate has 100 seats. Republicans hold 53 of those seats. To move any bill through the Senate, they need at least 60 votes. This means that even though Republicans hold the majority, they still need cooperation from Democrats in order to reach 60 Republicans, and Democrats were clashing over the Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire on December 31st of this year. To be fair, they were fighting over several issues, although this was the biggest point of conflict. This is where their attention was locked in. Now here's the deal they reached. Senate Republicans agreed that they will hold a vote on the Obamacare subsidies to decide whether they should be extended or not. The agreement was that the vote would take place by the second week of December. But think about what that really means. The agreement says they will hold a vote, but will that vote actually pass? They are already saying that the vote to extend the Obamacare subsidies is expected to fail in the Senate. That is why many Democratic leaders, especially the top Democrats in both chambers, are furious with the 8 Democratic senators who sided with Republicans to reopen the government. Now, this is the part that will make many people shake their heads. You need to understand that this bill only provides temporary funding for the government through the end of January. That takes us to January 30th next year, which is only 2.5 months away. Think about the timeline here. They are supposed to vote on the subsidy extension in December, and that vote is expected to fail. So what do you think will happen next? Democrats will be angry, and when January 30th arrives, Republicans and Democrats will be at each other's throats again. At that point, there will be a real possibility of another shutdown just 2.5 months from now, which means we could repeat this entire situation again. Now let us have a genuine conversation for a moment. This shutdown affected 42 million Americans who rely on SNAP benefits. But if we are being honest, this was not the main concern for most politicians. The bigger focus was the flight delays and cancellations. That is the part they were truly worried about. With Thanksgiving travel coming up and the December holiday travel season right afterward, politicians wanted to avoid backlash from travelers. That was their biggest fear, and that is what pushed them to reopen the government. Now think about what this means. If there is another shutdown starting January 30th, it would not take place during the peak travel season. Without that pressure, the situation could end up even worse than this one. That is what is on my mind. And I want to remind you that this has now become the longest government shutdown in the history of the United States. It broke the previous record of 35 days, which happened during President Trump's first term at the end of 2018. And until President Trump signs this new bill, the shutdown is technically still ongoing. Now let us move forward. When will SNAP recipients be made whole again for the amounts they missed in November? The answer will depend on your state because SNAP is managed at the state level. I wish I could be more specific, but that is the official answer. Here is another question. When will federal employees receive their back pay? 1.4 million federal workers missed their full paycheck in late October, and many only received part of the previous paycheck. By law, the federal government must issue back pay as soon as possible after a shutdown ends. They are not supposed to wait and simply add the amount to the next scheduled paycheck. That is not how the law is written. They must send the back pay as soon as they can. Now, regarding the Federal Reserve, you already know what they often say. They claim they will base interest rate decisions on the data, which includes the jobs report and the inflation report. Because of the shutdown, the jobs report for October never came out. The Federal Reserve made its decision on October 29th, without that information, which contradicts their claim of being data dependent. The November jobs report also did not come out, even though it is supposed to be released on the first Friday of each month. Once the government reopens, they are saying the jobs report could be completed within a few days. As for the inflation report, that one was scheduled for this week, but is expected to be delayed. However, the Federal Reserve meeting on December 10th still has some time to work with. You may remember what I said almost 2 months ago about how shutdowns affect the stock market. Historically, government shutdowns have very little impact on the stock market, and that pattern continued this time. There was no major market fear, and the announcement that the government would reopen actually lifted stocks. So for the market, this entire situation was basically a non-event. I mention this because if another shutdown threat appears at the end of January, you can expect the same outcome based on historical data. Minimal impact investors should not let these shutdown headlines shake them. I am not saying the stock market cannot fall in the short term. I am saying that if it does fall around that time, it will likely be caused by factors other than a shutdown scare. Now, regarding GDP, a recent report from Ernst & Young says this shutdown will reduce fourth quarter GDP by 0.8%, which is equal to about $55 billion in lost output. Honestly, in this strange economic environment, bad news often becomes good news for investors. If GDP drops, that gives the Federal Reserve more justification to turn the money printer back on and cut interest rates even faster. And of course, the stock market reacts positively to cheaper and easier money. It is a strange world, and these are unusual times, but that is the reality. That is the situation currently. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe. Thank you for your support.